This is a starting NFL quarterback, and this is me. And this is a story of how I end up playing poker in the same room as not only a starting NFL quarterback, but also multiple professional athletes. This was definitely one of the coolest experiences I've ever had in my life. I put out a post looking for specific types of candidates that had to do with sports and was asking for anyone in my network that had any plugs to these individuals. And then I had a mutual connection, commented on the post, and mentioned that a certain NFL player was going to be at his poker night he was hosting in a couple weeks. When I read it, I didn't know immediately who it was. Come to find out, he is a record-breaking rookie and starting punter for the Tennessee Titans. It was no other than Ryan Stonehouse himself. Kind of passive-aggressively, I respond, well, I'm more than happy to invite myself to poker night also. Ha ha ha. He sends a laugh emoji and then responds, let me make sure I have another seat available. Internally, I'm low-key freaking out. He just responds and says, you should come to the game, I'll squeeze you in. He sends me the details, and then he responds with a little bit of a heart-stopping message. You can only come if you introduce me to Mr. Beast. By the time I was done reading the sentence, I assumed it was a joke and just laughed. Introducing someone to Mr. Beast is a hard feat. I let him know that I'm gonna be there. Fast forward to poker night. Once I pull up to this place that I've heard about, I remember hearing in order to get into it, you actually have to have a code. And the only way you can get into this place is through this red phone booth. So you walk up to this red phone booth, you punch in the numbers into the telephone, and if your code is correct, someone will open the phone booth and let you in the venue. I had no idea what the code was. All I had was the contact number of my friend. So I call him, he doesn't answer. I call him again, he doesn't answer again. I text him. I'm low-key getting a little nervous inside that I'm not gonna be able to make it to poker night. Finally, I get a call back from my friend. He asks if I'm there, I say yes. He comes, meets me at the phone booth, and he lets me inside the venue. I walk into the back area where they have 2 poker tables set up and all the tables are full. Immediately, I noticed 3 individuals. The first individual is my friend who I've met only through Facebook, which is the first time I meet him. The second individual I meet is the one he mentioned earlier, Ryan Stonehouse. He's at the table as I walk in, playing with a bunch of other guys. And then the third player I immediately notice is Will Levis. He is the NFL starting quarterback for the Tennessee Titans. My buddy points me over to my seat, which is at the opposite table where Ryan and Will are. And I'm totally fine with it. I'm in the same room as them. I'm playing with these guys. I'm just here to have a good time. I go to where my seat is. I sit down. I look over at the other table where Will and Ryan are. I pause for a moment and I soak in that I am having one of the coolest moments of my life. While I was playing, I 100% noticed some of the stature of these guys. They were definitely not your average 5'10", 180-pound individual like myself. These were 6-foot-plus dudes having to weigh close to 250. There was no doubt in my mind that a couple of these guys that I was playing with that were 100% professional football players, either college or NFL. I didn't know exactly, but by the end of the night, I was going to find out who all these guys were. But I started off playing a little slow, a little reserved. I finally decided to play a hand that I felt pretty confident in. I go in, and by the end of the round, I don't remember the exact details, but after the flop, we get to the turn, and by that point, there's 3 guys in with a pretty hefty amount in the pot. I wish I could remember my cards, but I would be lying to say I did. But what I do remember is that I beat out these other 2 guys, and I end up winning a pretty substantial pot that night. Here's a picture of my chips by that point. A couple hours go by, a few guys are already out of the match, and they're not able to buy back in. And finally, I get a pretty decent hand. I remember it being some high cards, king, queens, or aces. I go in with the hand, I start to play, and by this point, I remember the flop is pretty good and mostly in my favor. So I decide to go in. By the time we get to the turn, there's only one other individual who I'm up against. At this point, I remember feeling pretty confident in my hand and knowing that I'm probably not gonna end up folding. If my memory serves me, I believe I had 2 pair, and it was a really solid 2 pair. There was potential for a straight on the board, but I didn't really think that was gonna happen. By the time we see the turn, I'm confident in my hand and I decide to pull the trigger and go all in. It's me against the guy directly across from me. I go all in, he calls, we show our cards, and lo and behold, this guy has the straight. It was an absolute blow to the chest. I didn't expect this to happen, but nevertheless, it is what it is, and I end up forfeiting all my chip. And as much as I did try to buy back in for the evening, because I wasn't ready to be done playing poker. It was past the time of the evening that anyone could buy back in. But I did end up finding that the guy who beat me and took all my chip was actually a former Alabama football player. But I did end up sticking around for the rest of the evening because one, I wanted to try and meet Ryan at this point, potentially Will, and then two, clearly this is a really cool night and I wanted to make the most of it. The tables kept dwindling, players kept getting out, and there was only a handful of individuals left. And that's when I decided to go sit over at the table where Will and Ryan were and my mutual friend, where there was only 4 other people there at the point versus the 8 or 9 that started there. I sit directly next to Ryan. My mutual friend lets everyone know that I'm the guy who was in Mr. Beast's grocery store. And I'm not gonna lie, it was really cool to have accomplished something that pretty much every single person in that room could reference and knew about, which was me living in Mr. Beast's grocery store for 45 days. A lot of guys there ended up asking me questions about it, laughing about it, asking each other how long they think they could stay. And it was a really nice icebreaker to be able to conversate with some of these guys like Ryan, my friend, and a couple other guys that I hadn't met yet. Once I was sitting at this table, I chatted with Ryan a little bit. I did mention a video idea that I had that would be really cool to do with him. He seemed on board. He was such a cool guy. So we exchanged our info. The last 2 guys standing, ironically, were Will and Ryan. They went back and forth until I believe by the end of the night, it was already so late that the guys just decided to split the pot and call it a night just because it was so late. I did get to conversate with Will a little bit, just asking him where he's from, where he was raised, more so small talk than anything really in depth. He seemed like a really cool guy from the conversation I had with him. The game's over, I end up calling it a night, I say goodbye to everyone, I hop in the car, and the next morning I follow my mutual friend from Facebook on Instagram. I see his story, and on his story he has a picture that he took of the evening. This is the picture right here, and as you can see, it's a bunch of the guys who were playing that night. And probably, like any of you would probably do, I start to click on all the tags. And this was the moment I realized who all these people were. Obviously, right here was Ryan Stonehouse, and then of course, Will Levis, who almost all NFL fans already know. The other guys he ended up tagging were 2 people that I mentioned earlier who I was almost certain they were professional football players. Come to find out, one of them was Nicholas Petit-Frere, who is a Tennessee Titans offensive lineman. The other guy he tagged was actually sitting at my table, and it was no other than Tennessee Titans number 61 offensive tackle, John O. Sorry, John, I don't know how to say your last name. There were a few other guys there who clearly had an online presence as well. That was really cool getting to meet them throughout the night. All in all, this was such a cool experience for me and something I'll remember for the rest of my life. I hope to be able to do this again in the future, and I'm pretty optimistic that it will continue to keep happening. My other hope is that I get to collab with some of these guys, especially some of these former athletes and current athletes, to do some videos in the future. All right, guys, that's it for the video. Make sure you like, subscribe, leave a comment, and go follow me on Instagram if you're not already. I'll be chatting with you guys in the comment section. Much love. Peace.